communicate with him on the mobile when his turn comes to speak.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Hindus Education Webinars. We've been having them every Saturday at 5 p.m. This week it's a little unusual topic for a webinar. In our webinars, we typically take up practical issues and give tips. We talk about courses, careers, job opportunities, and things like that. But today we are taking a step back. We have never reviewed the national education policy. We've taken it as a given and discussed various aspects of it. But today we're taking a few steps back and sort of reviewing it with the help of a few experts. Several educationists, renowned academicians, public intellectuals, they have come together to put together a draft people's education policy that is actually a direct challenge to the NEP 2020. It recommends that almost all the things that we have come to associate with the NEP to be thrown out lock, stock, and barrel. It appears so, and it's critiquing every single aspect of the NEP. It says the diagnosis of the NEP is correct, but the cure is worse. The cure will only worsen the disease, it says, and it comes up with several policy prescriptions. Now we are here to discuss those issues, and it also gives us a time to review NEP critically. It's been in implementation for 5 years. We have a very distinguished panel once again. We have people who have, experts who have formulated the policy, and we have panelists who may take a critical view of what the PEP says, and they represent certain distinct segment within education. We had trouble with connecting with Professor Sachidanand Sinha. I suppose he is still out of. We're not able to get him here, do we? Sir, can you hear us? Are you able to hear us, sir? I don't think he's able to hear us. Maybe we can fix that later. We have Professor Arun Kumar, who's quite a well-known academician. You would have seen him writing. You would have seen him, seen him speak in various television programs, YouTube channels, and so on. He's a leading economist. He was a professor at JNU. He has an interesting background in physics. He's a master's in physics from Delhi and as well as Princeton, and he served with much distinction at the JNU, and since then he's been quite active in several forums and formulating several policies. He has played a key role in this people's education policy. We'll start with him, sir. Please.
Hello.
Yeah.
I think we lost.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Can I
Yes, sir.
start?
Yes.
Yeah. I had missed the conversation in between. So am I supposed to start now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thanks to Hindu Educational Vertical Podcast for organizing this panel discussion on the draft's People Education Policy, an alternative to the NEP 2020. My effusive thanks to fellow panelists who have a long experience in the field, which the All India Save Education Committee would certainly like to benefit from their comments. Let me at the outset say that this is a draft policy. This is not the final one. This was released on the 22nd of May in Delhi and 20 other, maybe more than 20 other locations all over the country by our AI SEC regional chapters. I'm associated with the Delhi chapter, and so I was responsible for presenting it along with Professor Arun Kumar and several others before the public in a press conference. I am certainly not the author of this public people's policy report. I'm just one of the participants in the process. This draft was prepared in the last 2 years after consultation with a broad spectrum of stakeholders, the students associations, teachers unions, all across the country, and also the former vice chancellors, other stakeholders as well, parents certainly. And this draft keeps one important consideration where we have tried to in fact focus more on the rather than the metros, particularly in the lagging behind parts of the country, where both school education and higher education seems to be in deep crisis, in spite of the NEP. I'm here in the capacity, as I said, that I'm a member of the AISCC, as well as I have a small experience of researching in the area of school education. And therefore, I'm more of a student rather than an expert. And I would certainly like to benefit from the comments that I receive on whatever small aspects of a few important dimensions that I'll be presenting here. It's difficult for me to present all the areas that we have reflected upon. They are so wide and so differentiated and complex. I will not be in a position to, in fact, respond to all, but I will certainly take note of all the comments that I have from the distinguished panelists as well as people who are listening to us. Before I present the highlights of the People's Education Policy, the draft People's Education Policy, let me at the outset state that Indian educational scenario has been increasingly becoming segmented and widely differentiated. It is quite obvious that for quite some time it has some kind of a class, caste, gender, and regional implications. Why I'm saying this? I'm saying this precisely because we have found one singular or maybe one dominant stream of public education system failing to develop in our country. We have, for example, if we go at the bottom level, in the rural areas, we have the schools run by the panchayats, very poor in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Sometimes having one teacher or perhaps no teacher. Then we have other kinds of schools run by local self-governments. At the bottom of the pyramid, then we have the education department schools, then we have the model schools, again run by the public money. Then we have the Kendriya Vidyalayas, then we have all kinds of institutions, Air Force Public School, the Navy Public Schools, the Army Public Schools, not that they do not deserve to have their own, but in the name of public, it looks like, there is a class bias, which increasingly, if I were to perhaps take a look at it as to what was the composition of the students in 60s, in a government school, and then what it has become now, one can see the nature of social segmentation which has occurred. And this is an area of important concern. The premise of the People's Education Policy is to help develop a robust public education system that has been elusive for long. a system that is equitable, democratic, public funded, decentralized, scientific, and creative. That which will help us meet the technological advancements and requirements for a peaceful and progressive society. The draft policy, therefore, has, as I said, has some kind of tilt towards the bottom requirements of the bottom uh, segments of India's population, which in fact seems to be getting somewhat diluted and I would say in a significant way in the NEP 2020. NEP has been there for nearly about 5 years. It is in the implementation. But the reason why we have come up with this draft policy is to help the governments, the state governments, and the central government. Recently, there was a judgment which was passed by the Supreme Court that the recommendations of the central government cannot be imposed on the state governments, which in fact recognizes the very fact that in the federal structure, the state governments too have an important role to play. Now, coming to the important aspects, which in fact needs to be, and I said, there are only a few that I'm talking about, but I'm open to all kinds of questions and queries. Not that I'll be the only one responding to them. Rather, my intention here would be to take advantage of this platform and take as many views as possible so that, that will help us improve the people's education policy when we finalize it next year in January. One of the most important area of contention or the difference between the NEP and the People's Education Policy is that it is the People's Education Policy is critical of privatization and commercialization for obvious reasons that we do have, for whatever that the statistics may say, we have a fairly large number of children in all age groups, particularly in the 6 to 10 year age group, who are still outside the ambit of school education. And so, the privatization, commercialization, which in fact is being seen as a kind of a game changer. Not that we are against privatization, but certainly for reasons that we have that I shall be talking about, particularly in the context of professional and technical education. It's very important that with all the limitations that we may have had particularly up to and maybe a little after mid-80s, we can see this process of upward social and economic mobility, which in fact may be felt more among certain segments of the population, less among certain others. But there has been somewhat, if not a very linear one, but with some breaks, there has been this process, which in fact has picked up over a period of time. We can see that currently the participation in higher education of certain socially deprived segments of the population is becoming very, very significant. And that is where I think, with all the limitations that our education system may have had, it has certainly, and we have to underline this fact that, we have been in a position to ensure a certain amount of social and economic mobility, emergence of the middle class among certain landless, propertyless classes, which may be not comparable to their share in the population. And that's why the question of equity comes in. The policy dwells upon a whole range of issues, but as I stated that we'll be talking more about the structure, and we certainly welcome what NEP is putting its emphasis on pre-primary education, preschool education. And this is something, which we are all for it. ECCE has been a major area of policy intervention in school education for a fairly long period of time. If one were to perhaps turn the pages of the first Education Commission report, the very first chapter is on pre-primary education. That is the Kothari Commission report, Education and National Development in 3 volumes, which is a voluminous work and an extremely useful reference for anybody who wants to work on education. So therefore, the draft policy welcomes this. But NEP stops at this point. And after that, there is a certain amount of lack of clarity as to how it proposes to deliver this, whether it's going to be in the school segment, or it's going to be in the ICDS, mother and child welfare, or it's going to be a mix of the two, where it would be located again, particularly looking at the ICDS and the Anganwadis that I have been, I do a certain amount of field work, and we all know the conditions of the ICDS centers. Not that they do not perform the job to the extent that is expected of them, but certainly, there is a lot of variation. And Anganwadis are already entrusted with a whole lot of other issues, and education getting added to it would make it very, very difficult for pre-primary education to really take a takeoff. Particularly in the rural areas. So, as I said, it's a rural-centric, peripheral-centric kind of a point of view that I'm really trying to, because I still believe that if we could reach there, then we have reached everybody. On school education, there is again something, which in fact should be disturbing us, which in fact has been revealed also in the recent statistics of the Government of India, and that is UDAS 23-24, and one can see that trend taking place right from 2017 onwards. It was not simply relevant or important during the COVID years, but the tendency had begun right from 2017-18. There has been a significant decline of the number of schools, particularly because of mergers and what is being called a rationalization of teachers. The schools have been closed down, and according to the statistics of the government, UDAS says that nearly about 90,000 schools. That is according to their reporting, leading to over about 1 crore children found missing from the earlier years in terms of enrollment. So enrollment has come down. And now what are the causes of this? This we can get into details of it, but at a later stage, but the draft education policy, the People's Education Policy, strongly suggests that neighborhood schooling system, particularly in the light of the fact that there are geographically inaccessible terrains, there are rural areas with very limited transportation facilities and connectivity. So therefore, merging schools or locating children to other schools where children have to travel. And in fact, if you look into the first Education Commission report, and even before the Education Commission report, we had the All India Educational Surveys, which was supposed to, in fact, help the 5-year planning process. And that was one such survey which was being carried out by the Government of India, by NCERT, every 5 years. It got discontinued with UDAS coming in, not necessarily because of UDAS, but it shows that by about the time that the 9th report was about to come, we had reached almost all the nook and corner of the rural areas with population which could be closer to about 199 or maybe 399 or 499 in that band. But look at the aspect that that I would like to bring home here, that the settlement structure being such where nearly about 30% of India's rural population live in villages which are not more than 500 population. And in 500 population, to think of a sizable number of children in the age group 6 to 10, and therefore, closing down the small schools for whatever reason is certainly a violation of the Right to Education Act, which we are certainly opposed of, and we would like the government of India and the state governments to consider this point. Then we have the school complexes. Now, the idea of the school complex looks beautiful because, it says that, we'll be in a position to utilize resources better. The children will be in a position to have access to resources which could be therefore located within the school complex, with a higher secondary school being at the center of it. Will again mean that we are going to deprive the large number of primary schools of the basic facilities, and they will have to depend, middle schools and primary schools, on that core school, which will be located somewhere within the 10-kilometer radius of whatever. There doesn't seem to be much of a justification to switch over to 5 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4, whatever is the structure suggested, from 10 plus 2 system. Unless we took note of what is written in the draft policy of the NEP 2019. The 500-page plus report, that's the real report. The 64-page one is only a kind of a summary of that. And there is not much of a change. So what I suspect is,
looks like we've lost him again.
Yes.
Can you continue, sir, Professor Arun Kumar?
Okay, so let me sort of, Sachidanand Sinha has listed out a fairly detailed set of issues. Let me go to the structure actually. Whenever we do a policy because there have been some problems that are continuing, and we need to solve certain problems that are forthcoming. So we need to have both these together. Now, the new education policy certainly analyzed what are the problems, but I think what it did not do was to provide a solution to the problem that existed. And the second thing is that the NEP 2020 was supposed to have had consultation, but it was basically a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. What the People's Education Policy does is try a bottom-up approach. And therefore, what it has done is it has done a consultation in rural, semi-rural, and small towns, etc., so that we can devise a policy. And that's what I think Professor Sachidanand Sinha was mentioning. So in terms of solutions that the new education policy provides, it is not going to resolve the problems that are coming, and especially because technology is changing very rapidly, especially the challenge of artificial intelligence that is coming. And Professor Arrow had said, in a paper long back, that technology creates a mist of the future. It doesn't enable us to see the future clearly, so we become short-termists. So I dare say that the new education policy 2020 was only trying to provide some short-term solutions. The essential problem that faces Indian academia and the Indian school system, etc., is that we are still a very feudal society. I remember in 1976 when I was doing rural development in Madhya Pradesh, the local landlord told us, why do you teach the children of these poor guys? If you do that, who will do my free work? So he said, don't teach them. That's why, in a sense, we've never prioritized education the way we needed to have prioritized. So in other words, what is required is that we need to actually make a structural change. And what the new education policy does is not providing the right structural change where it will take care of the kind of bureaucratization and the feudal elements who control the education system. So, for instance, it has various things in it. The new education policy, like decolonization, bringing about autonomy, how to do learning, value of ideas, and various other such things. But it doesn't provide the right solution for them. So, for instance, I argue that our decision making is by academics who have a bureaucratized mindset, or there are bureaucrats and policymakers who have a political view. They don't have an academic view, and that's why what is reflected is that the structural change that is required is not there. I have argued recently that in the structure of universities there is a inherent tension, and that tension is that the universities are supposed to generate new knowledge, and on the other hand, they are supposed to continue the structures of society as they exist. Now, if you have to generate new knowledge, then you have to critique the existing knowledge. If you don't critique the existing knowledge, then you don't generate new knowledge. And if you heard Elon Musk recently, he said critiquing existing knowledge is very important. Galileo critiqued the existing knowledge, and that's how our knowledge about the universe, about the solar system, that advanced. So critiquing knowledge is very essential. And that's why one of the things that I have been arguing for the last 40 years is that dissent is the essence of higher education. Whereas, in a lot of institutions that I have seen and have participated in, dissent is suppressed because it is treated as a malaise. Now, what that does is that it circumvents the autonomy of the individual teachers, of the institutions, and so on. So why is autonomy necessary? Autonomy is necessary because academia has to be accountable to society. And to be accountable to society, it must produce new knowledge. And that new knowledge has to be socially relevant. As Professor Sachidanand Sinha was mentioning, the new knowledge that is being generated may not be all that relevant for society, and that's why the solutions tend to lead to further problems. So this problem of autonomy and accountability, these are two interlinked issues, and we must see the autonomy in a wider sense of the institutional autonomy. The structures of the institution have to provide autonomy. It's not good enough that the vice chancellor or the principal or the director has autonomy. The autonomy has to go down to the individual teacher. She or he has to be able to teach the way he or she sees the subject. Then only she or he will have a heart into the teaching and will generate new ideas for society. So therefore, autonomy and accountability are very crucial, and that I find is missing in the structure. Second is that the segmentation should be reduced. But what the new education policy does is it creates greater segmentation. Regarding decolonization, it wants to attract foreign universities, but foreign universities will bring their own framework, and that will actually further colonize rather than decolonize. So in other words, there's a contradiction in that as far as the new education policy is concerned. Then we have to deal, as far as education is concerned, with the market failure. What is market failure in education? Market failure in education is that education is a case of merit want. The individual is not going to give that much weight to education as society needs. So, for instance, the girl child's education is very critical, but a family will say the girl will get married and would leave the house, so therefore they're not put enough emphasis. And that's where you see education has to be treated as a case of merit want. In addition, it is also a case of increasing returns to scale, and also a case of asymmetric information. These require government intervention and their public education, and that's why I think what Sachidanand Sinha was mentioning about the neighborhood schools, etc., that becomes very important. So the question of finance therefore enters here. Now, if it is a case of market failure and government is required to intervene, then it requires finances. Question is a nation short of finances? We either spend our finances as public sector or as private sector, but these are national resources. So we have to prioritize how much public sector and how much private sector. If there is widespread poverty and destitution, then it has to be more public funding and less of private funding. So it's not that private funding should not be there, but the balance has to be there between private and public funding. So in other words, what is the current challenge? As technology is changing, we need to give better and better education. It's not good enough to learn by rote, and bulk of the learning in India is by rote. Now, that rote learning doesn't enable children to absorb the knowledge and develop it. Whereas the role of higher education is to take children to the cutting edge of knowledge and to develop that further. Now, that role can only be performed if children are able to absorb the knowledge rather than simply learn by rote. And that's why research and development in India is quite weak, and we are falling further behind. That's why, from China, we are importing a huge amount of high technology goods and low technology goods. We are importing APIs, and we are importing automobile components and electronic components, but also we are importing the Diwali lights and the holy pichkaris and the manja for the kites and so on. So in other words, R&D has to be given greater emphasis. And with the rapid change in AI, with a lot of unemployment that's likely to come, we have to teach children how to learn. So learning how to learn is going to be even more crucial than what it was earlier, because otherwise unemployment will become huge and children will not be able to adjust to the changing technology. Whereas now with fast changing technology, everybody has to adjust to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir. When I was reading by the way, where is the draft available for people to view and give you feedback?
I talked to Professor Sanjana, and he said that it has not yet been put up, but I have suggested that on the AISEC, that the organization of which he is the Delhi president, they can put it up on the website so that people can see it. Otherwise, I emailed it to you, and I think you forwarded it to some people. But you're right that it should be available to public on some website.
Okay.
It's in the process. We have, Am I audible?
Draft,
Yes, sir, you're audible. Yes.
Okay.
Reading the draft, it became quite clear that the people's education policy doesn't quite agree with many of the things in the NEP. It says, Professor Sinha was talking about how early education is a positive thing, but then NEP doesn't say exactly how it is to be done. A lot of it is going to fall upon the Anganwadis and the ICDS system for early education, and that's not a formal setup for education. So it doesn't go far enough for early education, he said. But besides that, too, on several things, for instance, this whole thrust towards involving the private sector, involving NGOs, making them work with state governments, with state schools, and so on. That is a big component of not just this NEP. It's been a feature of some of the education policies that have sought to be implemented from the 80s, going back to the Congress, to Rajiv Gandhi's new education policy. For instance, the model schools, the concept of model schools, now it's been expanded tremendously by the PM Shri program. And another important thing that the People's Education Policy makes a departure from is this concept of outcome-based education. Now, that's like big news these days. There's talk of foundational literacy and numeracy. You have these organizations like the ACER report, which is looked after every year or every 2 years. It comes out. It maps the basic skills, reading, language, and math skills of students, and it finds that India is lagging behind tremendously, actually. And although this year's survey results showed some sort of progress, but we're still far behind. Now, the PEP critiques that too. The main advocacy that I find is a reliance on state-funded formal education. Recruit more teachers, give more facilities within the schools, but keep the school system as it was before. My question is, that approach hadn't quite worked. Now, just pumping more for now. The question is, where are we going to get the funds? The second thing is, just pumping more funds into the system, recruit more teachers, provide more classrooms, more blah, blah, blah. Will that take us forward? Will that solve some of the endemic ills plaguing the Indian education system?
Can I come?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. You see, you are right that, the ACER report, talks about the outcomes which are certainly very poor. But where is the problem? The problem is it with the structure, or it is with the examination system, or it is with the pedagogy? Where is the emphasis? What is the outcome of this? I can tell you that the kind of a decline in the supply side is particularly the teachers. We have nearly about 60% of primary schools, which less than two teachers. You have or maybe three teachers, or maybe not that regular teacher make a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of a difference. But a person who is employed as a regular teacher undergoes some kind of a training, and also on occasions, in the earlier setup we had the system didn't take off, and that's very unfortunate. That why it didn't take off. We had the district education institutes of education technology.
We lost it again.
Yeah, I think what Professor Sinha is trying to point out is that we have an issue as far as the teaching is concerned. And this teaching, how do we improve that? Especially in schools. If you have temporary teachers, you have part-time teachers, they're not committed that much to the process of teaching. We also get school teachers involved in various other things, for instance, in the census and various other such things. So teaching is not given the priority that it needs to be given. And full-time teachers are required so that there's a commitment to the teaching process itself. If it is only seen as a sort of add-on to some other thing that the government is doing, then it's not going to have the same priority. So, how do we get good teachers? And also in terms of relative salaries, we find, whenever I've gone for interviews for school teachers' appointments, I find the quality of people who are applying for school teaching jobs to be rather poor. And this is even for good public schools in Delhi, where the salaries are much better than, say, what they may be in the rural areas. So if you have teachers who have very poor quality and also teachers who don't have a good understanding of the subject, they're not going to be able to, teach well. And I also find, when my child was studying in one of the premier schools of Delhi, I found that the teachers were more interested in completing the coursework rather than seeing whether the children had understood the material or not. So they rush through and complete the course by October, then they rush through and do another complete of the course by mid-January, and then finally the exams in March. But each time I found that except for a handful of very bright students, everybody else was floundering. So the absorption of knowledge, as I said, this rote learning, that is widespread in our education system, that needs to be tackled if we are to get better quality students. And therefore, in the universities also, it is very difficult because the language skills are also very poor. So if the language skill of a child is very poor, they're not able to absorb the knowledge, and this is where the language question also comes in very important ways, that we have to improve the language skills. And, like for instance, in getting research conducted, if I give a paper to a child and the child takes months to read that paper, whereas should have been able to absorb that paper in 1 or 2 days and produce something out of that. If you take months to absorb a paper, then you'll never be able to get through and do good research. So there's a lot of plagiarism that's going on, and that is, undermining research also. And therefore, the quality of the students who are coming out, that becomes a huge problem. So it's a structural problem that we need to address to get better teachers, to get better infrastructure, and formal education should be emphasized. In addition, where we can't do it, there you have the NGOs, you have the others also taking care. But it should be a duty of the state to give high quality, good education to all the children.
This gives me a chance to bring in the two other panelists here. Ramnath Sankaran, he's an engagement lead at SEGIS. SEGIS is it's an NGO that is dedicated to better governance in states. And he also works extensively with state schools. Ramnath he had a career at Infosys, and he dropped that and switched to service, right? Service through education, and he is with Segis now, and he has been working among government schools. So he will bring an interesting perspective. He has read the People's Education Policy, and he will bring an interesting perspective. We also have K. Ramachandran, who's currently calls himself an edtech entrepreneur. We all know him as a journalist of some repute, quite a bit of repute, and he has covered education extensively. And so he also takes a very nuanced way of what the NEP is trying to do, how, and what the PEP is saying. He has read both, and he's here to give his take on these crucial questions. Ramnath, would you like to go?
Yeah, please. Ramnath, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Kalanji and Professor Arun Kumar. I hear you, and I agree with everything that you said in terms of the challenges that are facing the education system. The quality is bad. We are not getting good quality teachers often enough. But I did not find enough solutions coming out in PEP, right? Again, it seemed like the problem diagnosis was appropriate, but the solution side, it was more critiquing the NEP, not so much on providing solutions to the very same problems that were coming out, right? And there was also the dichotomy of, on one side we are having the schools that we reached all villages, the nook and corner of villages. We were able to establish schools, and then at the same time there is privatization that is happening. Children are moving to private schools because the quality of the government schools is not so great. We have urbanization that is going on large scale across the country, where people are moving towards towns and cities. So the village population is shrinking. Our fertility rates are coming down. So essentially, the population in school is going down, right? And at the same time, the PEP is also looking at improving the teachers ratio that is available. Not 2 teachers per class is a recommendation that I saw in PEP. Now, how do we resolve this, right? One side, we don't have good quality teachers coming in. On the other side, we have less and less students studying per school. And the PEP is critiquing the school consolidation or rationalization or merger, whatever that we call it, right? So how do we solve the problem?
So shall we take Ramachandran ji and then come back to these questions?
Yes, probably, sir. Yeah, KRC, go ahead. Ramnath is asking, okay, what's the solution?
Yeah, so I would suggest Professor Arun Kumar that if somebody wants to answer Ramnath, we can go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, may I come in? You see, you were right that we haven't really reflected much on this aspect. Although there is a section on teachers' education, which needs to be reworked on. As I said, that we haven't really come up with any.
I think Sachi's voice is breaking all the time.
Based on the kind of discussion that we have had, we do understand that we needed to really strengthen the district level teachers training infrastructure, which in fact has, if you look into the entire structure, which in fact is already in place in several states. It may not be as widespread as in some other states. Say, for example, we have the regional SCRTs, then we have the state level SCRTs, then we have the district level institutes of educational technology.
Right.
What has happened is that over the years, the grassroots level institutions have been completely abandoned.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
I think apart from what Sachidanand Sinha was saying, May I also say I wrote a piece in the Economic and Political Weekly in 1987, and I pointed out the relative salary differentials. The relative salary differentials are huge. If you become a college teacher compared to if you join the civil services compared to the private sector. So nowadays, children look at the prospects for the future. And given the huge salary differentials that are there, very few good students want to come into school teaching. I also did a survey of children wanting to become school teachers, and I found that the families would prefer the child to become a clerk in a bank rather than a school teacher. A large number of teachers, therefore, are women teachers, women who are looking for work after the children have grown up. So the commitment to school teaching becomes very lax. It becomes like a kind of a second job. And that's why you don't have very good school textbooks coming out from individuals. These are all school textbooks prepared by the state boards and the central NCRT, etc. But what we need is a much more dynamic system in which how do we teach the children? That comes out through the experience of school teaching. My father was a member of the NCRT committee in 1967 to write the civics textbook, but he was a professor. He did not have experience of teaching children. So even though there were 3-4 other school teachers also associated with it, but they didn't really, write a textbook which would appeal to the students. Similarly, when I've seen the NCRT textbooks, sometimes they are very sort of unappetizing as far as children are concerned. We have to see how to get the attention of children. So we need to professionalize the school teaching much more and make it far more attractive for good students to come into school teaching.
Okay, got you. So, Kalyan, if with your permission, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, I will make a brief comment on a couple of aspects that I have heard so far, and then plunge into my 2 aspects that I wanted to highlight. So, I think the problem of teacher shortage, the problem of quality shortage, the problem of infrastructure shortage can never be solved in a linear way at all. I think we need to look at it completely differently. I need to look at it as these problems are human problems, but I don't think they have human solutions. We need superhuman or technology solutions. I am completely convinced about it. But I do not at any point of time trying to say that you learn online. No, not at all. But how do we use technology to probably improve the capability of teachers and students? So if, for example, I'll tell you a very, very simple thing. Today, an agentic AI costs less than the development of an agentic AI is such low cost that it is quite plausible for the NCRT or the UGC or for any other institution from the government of India to put in a certain set of people who will be able to create these, which will be the assistants for teachers to help them. For example, if a teacher, let us say his pedagogical skills in terms of classroom interaction, classroom leadership is low, AI agents can step in. If the ability to translate book to class is low or is lower compared to, say, probably a more stringent benchmark that you are going to probably adhere to, then again the agent, the artificial intelligence, really the technology can help. It's a very big cliche that in the last 2-3 years we have heard today that if technology will never replace teachers, but definitely a teacher who is not using technology will be replaced by a teacher not using technology will be replaced by a teacher who can use better technology. I think that way, if we are able to make technology augment, improve, and probably improvise and probably add to the sheen and luster of a normal class teaching process that we are all seeing today, I think that probably that's probably one way. And I don't think pouring a huge amount of money into any problem is going to help you. No way. You can't. I don't think putting probably 20,000 crores per district or 20 or for 50,000 crores per state is going to solve that kind of a problem. I think definitely there is scope for improving certain aids that the teachers have to improvise. For example, can the agent prompt the teacher, I ask a question now here, pause and repeat the point. Can you probably get a better example? Can you show an example? Can you illustrate this better? Can I help you in illustrating this point better? If technology is able to provide that kind of prompts, I think there is a terrific amount of capability that we can enhance among even ordinary teachers. I will leave it at that, and I will probably I will go to the next 2 points that I wanted to take. I can take a
Yeah.
pause. I can take a
Okay,
pause.
Ramnath, in your experience, where you don't have to name the schools, but perhaps you can talk about where your organization was able to make a meaningful difference to a school's progress, achievement, slash whatever metrics you want to use, and whether technology played a role in it. What role did technology play? Because you work with state government schools primarily.
Yes, we do, but as an organization, we don't work directly with the schools. So we work with the state system to help them govern the schools better in whatever assistance in
My
small ways
Ramnath,
to
my
provide.
point is,
Mhm.
like where you found the state unable to handle something or inadequate or not equipped, and Segis was able to say, okay, do this, and that sort of, I'm not saying it worked wonders, but perhaps it made a difference. Because what the PEP does is it critiques the involvement of private players, NGOs, and as providing a sort of a key role in the whole education system. But can you
So,
tell us?
yeah, sure. Kalan, instead of taking out about my role or my organization, I can talk about generally role of NGOs and private players and what do they do and all of that, right? See, I'll take this more broad view, which says that if you find in a particular neighborhood shop that the quality of whatever product that you're buying is bad, you don't say that all of the private shops that are there are bad and no government needs to provide all of that, right? So it is also the decision of the individual to try and choose the right kind of products and solutions that they need. And so is the case with whether it is private players or NGO or whatever. There are good organizations and there are really bad organizations as well, right? So as a department official, whether they are choosing a private player, and no, it's not just about education, right? Even if it is for laying out roads or building hospitals or whatever the case may be, they need to try and understand what the different private players or NGOs can provide. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What is the strength of the government organization? Where are the areas in which their skills are lagging? Can an organization come in and fill in that gap? And also again QC'd by the department folks, right? I think Professor Arun was saying about the textbooks are not great. No, they are not suitable for children, and the diets and the SCRT in some of the states do not have the capacity to come up with no new kind of books, and it needs to be professionalized, right? That can be one example where a private player or an NGO can come in and provide that kind of a capability, but it should not be left to that organization to write whatever what they want and thrust the organization's philosophy onto a curriculum, and that should be stopped by the department to say that okay, we have these guidelines and you need to develop within these guidelines, and also the department needs to vet those materials or whatever that they've prepared and then approve it and then take it forward, right? So leaving it to any organization, whether it's private or NGO or others, is a recipe for disaster, right? So from selection through monitoring and providing guidance, through QC, quality control and checks on what is being delivered, all the way through, the department officials need to be thoroughly involved, and then they are likely to get the benefit of what other organizations can bring in. But if that is not the case, yeah, then you are going to get a lot of rotten apples inside.
Sure.
Can
Okay.
I add, here, technology is certainly a great aid. What Krish pointed out should be utilized as far as possible. There's no doubt. But a teacher also has a role as a role model for the children. That role should not be diminished. And if a teacher is not very much up to the mark, they'll not be able to use technology effectively also. So, the example that you gave of using agentic AI, if I'm not up to my subject, if I'm weak in my subject, I will not be able to use the AI very effectively. So what is happening is that, as emphasis has gone more and more on technology, the role of teacher as a sort of a role model for the children, for how the citizenship is to be built up, how democratization is to take place in schools, these are the kind of things that, fall behind. Whereas these are very
Agree.
important social
Agree,
aspects.
Professor. Agree.
So,
Agree. It is like typical project. In a project, you try to solve one big problem. There are also some few other. That's definitely I agree, and I will definitely need to build the guardrails that ensure that technology is not the only solution, but same only technology enhancing, but at the same time does not take away the a central role that the teacher or the teacher or the classroom leader plays. And I agree with you. I definitely agree with you that way. I will leave it at that by saying that I agree with you. The two points that I wanted to emphasize after going through the PEP, I don't think I spent enough time to do the kind of research that is necessary that this PEP demands. But having gone through certain parts of it, I want to highlight only 2 points. One is the role of private sector. I do not want to overemphasize the role of either public sector or public sector at any point of time. Today, an institution is made up of its students. And IIT today comes from there, not because of the great professors it has. It comes from the brilliant students that is able to get. So I would say that the central role of any institution that way is more important than or the kind of students that come to an institution defines the way an institution works. If the institution gets bad students or poorer students or not people who are not the kind of people who would be able to make a mark over a period of time, so then that institution would also get probably they will not be able to survive. So high quality institutions survive because of high quality students, and these demanding students demand better quality teachers, and better quality students are able to produce the cycle in terms of better amount of students. But I would so my essential point is twofold. One is I don't want to get into this 20th century argument of private versus public. I would rather go into how do you ensure that the best of definitions are made, the best of outcomes for both the teachers as well as students are described, or possibly what is it? What is the role of each person? The teacher, the governing system, the governing council, the vice chancellor, the teacher, whoever he is, define their roles, and you go by that. You rather that where the money is coming from. The money comes from a private or public. I would probably not look at it that way. And the second dimension to this, if it were not for the probably 40,000 private institutions in India, I don't think India would be certainly in today's position to probably become the world's fastest growing economy. You look at the entire IT services industry, you look at the electronic industry, you look at every single industry that you can look of that contribute to that contribute to the economy, except the primary sector. I would look more the secondary as well as the tertiary sector has been growing and has been contributing significantly to economic growth only because of the larger number of people that institutionally that we have been able to turn out. Whether the graduates come from this place or that place, I don't think that is counting as far as economic impact is concerned. So I would say that we need to have a good balance between all types of investments that is coming to. Yes, I would be definitely very, very wary of taking foreign investment. Yes, that I would agree. Foreign investment is not right for India right now because there are ideological pressures, there are systemic pressures, and also I don't think India for now is prepared or mature enough to take foreign investment for education at any point of time. Despite all these investments of new universities coming in, these are all small drops in the ocean. The bigger ocean is by the Indian systems themselves, private and public. So, but I would not at any point of time look at education as whether it is coming from private or public, but rather at the economic impact. And we all know about the World Bank studies. We know about the Chicago School studies. There are so many studies that every rupee invested in higher education has an 8 rupee ROI in the next 10 years. And it doesn't. These studies do not make a difference between who makes this investment, private, public, charitable, whatever. So that's one point that I wanted to make. The second aspect that I wanted to talk about is a very brief part of the PEP that I saw about online education rollback. I will look at it this way. Say, I am looking at today, I am looking at a person who passed out of Standard 12 in Madhubani district in Bihar, in rural Uttar Pradesh, in rural Rajasthan, in Ramnad in Tamil Nadu, Kalahandi in Odisha. He has passed out in 2008. He has completed 12 standard, barely got 40-45%. He somehow is struggling, and he has now, after 15 years, he realizes he has some potential and he wants to learn something. And today, between 2000, let us say 2005 to 2025, in the last 20 years, probably there are more than, I would say that 50 to 60 billion people who have passed out and are who passed out at 12 standards, who have reached certain amount of maturity in life in the last 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, whatever you take. They feel they have lost out on education. What if I had gone to a college? And the person does not go to if a person is not attending college today, from a Tamil Nadu perspective, I would say that it is just because he cannot afford to do that. Or maybe he doesn't have the marks to do that. If he has to go to a government system, he needs marks. If he has to go to a private sector, he needs money. So if both are not available, what does he do? There are millions and millions of students. And this is exactly where the technology enhanced education is offering. One. The second type of person is almost 3 to 4 lakh students who are pursuing a postgraduate degree in the online, in MBA or MCA today. They are doing it because they had to go to their first job. They finished their graduation, they went to join either the IT industry or an ICICI bank or an Apex bank, or they went to a local village office, wherever they worked out. Now, after 5 years, they realized that if I want to become a bigger contributor to my organization, or possibly I want to reach my potential, I need to get a postgraduate degree. But he cannot or she cannot drop out of the system and go back to a B school, go back to a postgraduate education. This is exactly the person who is going. So in essence, the person who wants a very powerful, robust campus-based knowledge is set A. And there is a set of persons who want to take continuing education, either the graduation or post-graduation, is set B. I can tell you there is zero intersection between section A, set A and set B. There are completely two different. This animal is different from that animal. This is the person who wants a campus. He will go to a campus. He has to be given a enriching amount of education in campus. The second person, the second set of people who are lost out in education, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, and they go for. And this is the kind of people who are looking for. We know that correspondence education failed. We know that distance education is not adding value to anyone. And this is exactly where online education is going to make a difference. Not that I'm defending it. I'm saying there are two different animals, but this animal is co-different. These are two completely different beings. And for them, for the second set, I think it's a great idea if they are able to access high quality education by a technology enhanced means. I will stop there.
Okay, we do have actually the people who registered and watching us have posted some really interesting comments and questions. I will flag a few for discussion. Sudhamshu Mishra says the People's Education Policies counter proposals advocating for a fully public, state-funded and decentralized system rooted in foundational principles and traditional structures. How do these fundamentally divergent approaches address India's persistent challenges of access, equity, and quality, particularly for marginalized communities? There was another question that said, what is the NEP saying regarding marginalized communities? Probably nothing. It says, Sudhanshu is also saying that, and he's asking, what are the realistic pathways and potential trade-offs for implementing either vision at scale across India's diverse socio-economic landscape? So the PEP calls for 10% allocation for education. I suppose our budget expenditure is some 50 lakh crores. Where are we going to come up with 5 lakh crores?
So, if you think about resources, resources are fungible. It depends on your priority. How much priority do you give to something? You can increase or you can decrease depending on the priority. And we have a very large black economy. The black economy size is so large that if you could actually tap it, you could get easily, some like 10% of the GDP as additional taxes. At the moment, they're stuck at about 17.5% tax GDP ratio. If we tackle the black economy, we could easily raise it by 10%. That would give you 10% of GDP for education. So in other words, it really is a question of prioritization. Also, it's a question of what view do we have of education? Because if our view of education is that it's critical, then we'll prioritize it more. If our view is that it's secondary, it doesn't require that kind of prioritization, then we won't spend that kind of resources. So in other words, what I also find is that we separate teaching from research. I remember my father was a professor of Allahabad University in the 1930s. Allahabad University was considered one of the great universities, but the topmost professors, they used to say, we are for teaching, not for research. The moment you separate teaching from research, the dynamism of teaching goes, the dynamism of education goes. So this view that we have to generate new knowledge, that has to be uppermost. The second thing that I would like to say here is that there's a vast unemployment for the educated youth. So the learning process itself gets downgraded because a lot of young people feel that they need actually some kind of push to be able to get a job. If they don't have a push, they won't get a job. So rather than emphasize good quality education, because the system is not emphasizing the system of employment, and the rewards is not emphasizing. You can see that in the IITs that the best students actually don't go into research. The best students after doing BTech will go into management, because that's where they go into marketing and into finance, and they'll become a better. Whereas the one who does PhD will actually be retiring at vice president. So our industry also, our government also doesn't prioritize. That's why, if you look at the way that the salaries are fixed, first the bureaucrats' salaries are fixed, and then the teachers' salaries are fixed. They're slotted somewhere in there, whereas they need more degrees. So, the entire signaling in the society, whether from private sector or from the public sector, is that you don't need much education. Now, if the signaling is that, the children will also prioritize accordingly. So that's why I'm saying the structural changes are needed. So to answer the question, if you only going to say that, okay, if I have push or if I have the capacity, I'll do it. I'm reminded of the Allahabad High Court judgment. The Allahabad High Court judgment said that when the children of the politicians and the bureaucrats are going to the same school as the poor children, then the quality of education in the schools will be improved. But that was never implemented, even though there was a judgment on that.
Okay, Rajeshwari Singh, I believe she's in touch with the grassroots. She's pointing out some interesting things. She's saying, on the pretext of rationalization, many ordinary schools are being closed in rural Haryana. And she's saying science subjects are being dropped. Have you heard that, sir? We talked about schools being closed and...
Yeah, I think Kasturirangan Sinha was referring to that when he was saying. So yes. Sachin, maybe you can add to that. I think he's not able to hear.
He's not able to hear. Okay, we have an interesting question. Shrinka Bose, she's asking, we talked a little bit about Acer and other measures, but she's asking what would be a good way to understand India's global position in education today. He doesn't participate in PISA. We did it once and we came out pretty bad. Our performance was quite pathetic. I suppose Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh were two states selected because they were, I think, advanced in education. Even they performed very badly in that test. But where do we stand in global education, sir?
Our best students go abroad. I mean, I was the topper in my BSc and MSc, etc. So I went to Princeton University. Why did I not stay back? Because I thought that, the research that is being done here wasn't up to the mark. And therefore, I decided to go abroad to one of the better universities in the US. And then I came back and I didn't continue my physics. I switched to economics. And the reasons for those are that, here research is not valued, we did a small study of the research going on in Delhi University Physics Department, in 1974 when I had come back from Princeton. And we found that out of the 104 PhD students doing a PhD in physics in the Delhi University Physics Department, only 2 were pursuing it. 102 out of 104 were pursuing civil services. So you can find that the structure of rewards, the structure that society has of where power lies. So therefore, a lot of students get motivated towards moving to other things than to doing research and teaching. And if they are doing research and teaching, then they go abroad if they are bright. And our systems are that if we do a PhD from abroad, we get a job. If we go abroad for doing postdoc, etc., we get a job. But if we do that within India, we are not preferred. So therefore, the system itself forces our students to go abroad and seek better opportunities.
Ramnath and KRC, where do you think India stands in global education? How good are we, or how bad are we?
So first is every education system is rooted in its own culture, sir. Every system is rooted. So our culture is so there is a very specific way that Indians learn. Indians learn for certain specific reasons to go up the value chain. Whereas in the US, the motivation for education is different. So I think that way I would not like to probably compare students. The best way to compare would be institutional level. At the student level, why is it that so if 42% of Intel's VLSA programmers are Indians, what other thing that you need? I'm asking you. More than 30% in NASA. If you look at all the IT organizations throughout globally. So I think that way, if you are going to, it is a student-to-student comparison cannot be done so easily, because there is a context in which you learn, the culture in which you learn, there is a process that we undergo. All of these are different from way. But intellectually, I don't think there is a challenge any which way. I don't think I would say a Polish student is intellectually better than an Indian student. No, I would not say that. It is rooted in culture. It is rooted in the system. There is a process by which we get. So the best way to judge an Indian institution or an Indian student would be how many of them are probably doing better. Why is it that Indians are the highest earners in the US economy among as demographic groups? So there are reasons for that. So I would not venture into probably going into a one-to-one comparison.
No, but as I was saying, the best from India go abroad, whether to USA or UK or Australia or Canada. So we lose the best because the opportunities here are less in terms both of research. Because you see, when I went to Princeton, the kind of research that I could do, I could not do here. Maybe at TIFR I could have done it, or Indian Institute of Science Bangalore, but other universities, those opportunities are much fewer. So if you are a good student, you prefer to go abroad to do research. You have a better job prospect when you come back after doing that. So I think the systems themselves are forcing the good students to go abroad, and I think the structure of our universities, where dissent is not allowed. The autonomy that I got at Princeton in terms of what I could do was tremendous. The kind of not just because it is rich and gave a lot of good equipment and so on, but I think the freedom to think, the way the structure of students is, the environment that is provided for research, those are very important things for doing good research, and therefore people would tend to gravitate to that. So it's I agree it's the structure, but the structure we have to see that the opportunities that are provided, the environment that is provided.
Okay, we have some good comments. I'll move on to some of them. Anil Pradhan says technology. We had a discussion about technology. He's saying technology alone can't solve this problem. We have to have capable and motivated teachers. We've made that point several times in this.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Technology can enrich learning, but technology will not solve this learning deficiency problem. George Joseph says it's a welcome sign that citizen forums are discussing the NEP, while government agencies are avoiding public discussions on important issues like the NEP. Okay, I hear a chuckle there from KRC. What are the possible ways to save the Indian education system? Well, I suppose PEP is an alternative they have proposed.
No, very simple, boss. Very simple, Kalyan. Very simple.
Okay.
Remove state. 1.4 billion people cannot be taught or schooled by some 20 wise men sitting in Delhi. No, that's the point. That's a root out. education, bring it back to state level. 1. 2. Some of the best schools in Tamil Nadu in the 90s and 30s were the municipal schools, the panchayat board schools. They were doing well. So while decentralization is a demand from a state to center, it has also got to go further down. I think the local bodies, like what happens in the US or UK or almost every other nation in the world, or the advanced nations, where education becomes a subject at a local level. Schools are funded by the local municipal corporations. Teachers are funded from there. School infrastructure comes from there. So that way, I think that is easily the most time-tested, proven pathway. I don't think a central education policy, of course, a policy is always there. In fact, I come to the situation that policy doesn't make a difference to any human being individually. Policies for governments and bureaucrats to talk about. How does it matter for a student or a teacher teaching 4th standard? What is the autonomy that he or she learns? Does he make the children, the child understand reading, writing, arithmetic? That is far more important. So for which autonomy at all levels, in the classroom, at the local body level, at the state level, at the district level, and probably at that is where that is the best and most proven way. It is throughout the world. It is proven. China is the most centralized economy, but Chinese schools are local. All Chinese schools are local.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head. You're absolutely right. I agree. The decentralization, local participation, especially all stakeholders, like parents' involvement in the schools and holding the teachers in the schools accountable. Exactly. I remember in the US, the local bodies run the schools, and everybody sent their children to the local schools. In fact, parents select where they would live based on the kind of education that their children will get, and they very actively participate in it. So therefore, local bodies, absolutely essential. Parents' involvement is absolutely essential. But in India, because large number of children are first generation learners, the parents are themselves not learned. Therefore, their involvement has to be encouraged. It has to be brought about. They have to be encouraged. Like for instance, in the Delhi model school, there the parent teachers were made very focal of the school system. So we have to experiment with that and bring about accountability of the teaching system to society.
Exactly.
Julie Kapoor, in fact, she touches upon this. She says NEP 2020 emphasizes centralized reforms, such as bodies like the National Education Commission. Of course, there are many other centralizing features of the NEP, many agencies, many other aspects as well. But she's asking, how does the people's policy envision a more decentralized and democratic education system? I think here she made a point that in a test case, the Tamil Nadu government has always demanded decentralization, but then many critics say that their view of decentralization stops with the state and doesn't really percolate down to the local bodies level. It's a very informed critique that they make of how does the people's policy look at it?
You see, when we look at the people's policy and when we talk about decentralization, we basically are talking about the local bodies. And that's why we are talking about education being shifted to the state list. Empowering the local bodies, as it has been done not only in you were talking about Tamil Nadu, but one can take the case of Himachal Pradesh sometimes back. I really do not know the situation now, but Kerala, yet another example where the local bodies ran the schools. I have surveyed some of the villages and the schools in Ardian localities. In the forested areas. So, the decentralization, in spite of the fact that, you have the first generation learners and the parents may not be very vocal in either in school development meetings and so on and so forth. We have the provision institutionally. But look at the composition of that, where people who in fact are supposed to be the members, they are informed people, distinguished people from in diverse fields, but then they take over and they have their own perspective. There is hardly any interaction with the local people, and the parents just be silent spectators, which is a story in Punjab that I saw when I was working for the Punjab Governance Reforms Commission. This is what I have seen also in several other states. So therefore, one of the most central part, which one should talk about is governance and autonomy. I think Ramnath ji was talking about governance aspect, and he is quite, and I agree with him that, one should bother about as to where from the money is coming or not coming is a secondary part, but how we govern the institution. And there I think, the role of the parents will have to be encouraged. The role of the teachers will have to be there, and only when they are regular teachers. Otherwise, things would again fall back. So that is where, the crux of the matter is. The teachers' training program. Yeah.
Another aspect I think that we need to worry about is the politicization of school education. There is today a lot of political interference in the school education. That I think we need to see somehow, we need to tackle that.
Okay. Some of the other comments. What practical strategies does the People's Education Policy propose to resist commercialization of education? Julie Kapoor.
I think one of the things I've been arguing is that anytime you need action, first you need consciousness. If you think everything is going fine, you will not change it. So critique is the beginning of any action. If you say that there is some problem, then you try and resolve it. If you say everything is fine, then no need to change it. So what the People's Policy does is to give a critique of where we have gone wrong, and now to reform it, what are the steps that are needed. And here, decentralization and giving power back to the academic community to actually reform the academic systems. If it comes from the bureaucracy or the politicians, that will not reform the system. So I think the reform requires a greater participation of the teachers, of the institutions themselves, a greater autonomy to them to be able to do things on their own. When there are like 100 flowers bloom, then something good will come out of it.
Also, may I add, that there is increasing centralization of research. Now you have the National Research Council, which will decide as to what topic students should take up. Now, we are, that's where, the autonomy gets totally affected. I can tell you, I can suggest several instances in the last 4 or 5 years, although I've superannuated, but I keep hearing where students' proposal gets stuck simply because now the supervisor says, well, this is not a problem to research on. I mean, when there is a problem apparently that one would like to work on. So now there is a very conscious attempt, and that is where Professor Arun Kumar, when he was talking about politicization, I think the politicization has entered the level where even within the teaching community, we are becoming, or we are made to be conscious that, well, these are the topics that you can work on, and these are the topics should be avoided. Now today there is absolutely no debate as to what is really happening with the curriculum structure in DU with 4-year undergraduate program. How much of time that they have to spend, children have to spend in attending classes of different kinds. One here, another online, the third one drawn from MOOCs and all that. Look at the quality of MOOCs. I mean, somebody should evaluate. In the name of online education and lectures being made available, I think these are areas where one has to really look at, and one has to be serious about it. Somebody was talking about the quality of school textbooks. I'm a product of Bihar. I did my education right up to graduation in Bihar. And not that it was a great institutional structure that I studied in. I studied from Mufassil school to JNU. But, the best part of it was that our school textbooks, which were being produced by Bihar State पाठ्यक्रम कोई एक समिति होती थी, they were extremely good quality texts, and gradually what happens is that, they take over because, their children were not in a position to really compete with children from elsewhere. So they switched over to NCERT textbooks. So this was yet another way, that centralization began, which was in fact the very purpose of states having their own syllabus or curriculum in addition to what was really happening within the discipline or within a particular area of knowledge, and to put something which is specific to their state was the very idea. Now, most of the states have done away with that.
Mr. Kalyan, I have another.
That is where different.
Yes, we will.
Can I leave?
We'll have another question and then we'll close with that. We had so much discussion about teachers.
Yeah.
Calvin De Silva is asking, do you think we should have a specific entrance test for teachers?
Have what?
Do you think
Why
we
not?
should have a specific entrance test for teachers?
Interesting question. So there are entrance tests everywhere. Today, teachers are selected through a teacher training. So there is an entrance test today.
Professor Sinha, what would you say?
There is already. Yeah.
Already there is.
You asked me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, there are institutions where there is an entrance test, like DU B.Ed program has an entrance test. Several other reputed colleges of education, they have entrance tests, but I mean, there are few of them. I mean, you see, the worst that happened within the field of education, particularly school education, was during the time when B.Ed program was selling through distance education. And that is the period from late 80s right up to early 2004, 2005. When it was stopped.
Yes,
so we have to really cover that particular period. Yeah. So, and the amount of money that the institutions made. I mean, I know of one institution where I started my career, MD University Rohtak, and they were almost earning 35 to 40% of their total revenue from teachers training program. And that was in the online mode. And they were not the only ones. In fact, Jammu had a series of rather hundreds of such shops. This is not to say that this is a reflection of the private sector, but this is a reflection of how, we go on distributing degrees in the name of distance education, which in fact is supposed to be a very serious kind of a thing. So we need to really put in a lot of thought in terms of setting up institution. NEP talks about, that the B.Ed program should be made part and parcel of the university teaching. It should be campus-based kind of a thing, which is a good idea. But at the same time, you have specialized departments. There is nothing wrong if the B.Ed program is also run by leading institutions of the country. That will certainly improve the quality of B.Ed program. I think, among all the professional degrees, B.Ed is perhaps the least desired and least talked about even within the university systems. And that we need to change.
Okay, on that note, we will have to...
And least discuss, yes.
We will have to wrap up the discussion. You've crossed, you've gone 30 minutes over, but the questions keep coming. There are some very interesting questions on touching upon...
You can carry on. Just excuse me. Mr. Kalyan, why don't you carry on? I'll just excuse myself.
No, we are wrapping up right now, sir. We've gone over quite a bit.
Okay.
No.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
I would request I would request Mr. Kalyan to please pass on all those questions to me, and because those questions will help us in further improving the quality of our input.
On your comments tab, sir, you can see those questions right now.
Better to compile it and send it, sir. That's better.
Yeah, why not? We'll do.
Thanks a lot.
Because I'm very poor at that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.